Hello and welcome to another great show for the Coston Show. My name is Bethany Criswell and I'm one of the co-hosts.
And I'm Roland Coston-Criswell.
First, I want to say thank you so much for all of the messages that we've been receiving on our Facebook page at the Coston Show. We've gotten all your ideas for shows as well as some of your comments and questions and feedback. So I wanted to say thank you so much for that. We have a great show for you today. Our guest is joining us from the Poise Foundation. He is the executive director and his name is Mark Lewis. Once we take a break real quick, we'll come back with Roland Coston-Criswell and he will lead us in our pre-need presentation for the week.
I have a promise to be a doctor. I have a promise to be a chef.
Did you know that what children learn before kindergarten affects how well they will do in school and even what they might be when they grow up? Early education is so important to children's success in school and in life. Talking, reading, and playing with children from birth builds the language, math, and social skills they need to be ready for kindergarten. Choosing quality early learning programs like Keystone Stars, Pre-K Counts, Head Start, Early Intervention, Nurse-Family Partnership, and Parent-Child Home Program provides children with good teachers and learning activities that spark creativity and a love for learning so they can grow and develop. You can help Pennsylvania's young children reach their promise. To learn more, get involved, and tell your story, visit PAPromiseforchildren.com.
Because every child is
Pennsylvania's future!
Well, hello. I'm glad to bring to you today the pre-need portion of our program. Last week we discussed the difference between a memorial service and a funeral service. If you remember last week, I asked you to visit the NFDA website to view how much a traditional funeral service costs. Does anyone remember or know what the answer to that question is? That answer is $8,000. For a traditional funeral service, when you're going to a cemetery, that price is $8,000. Now, that price does not include the cemetery expenses. In the Pittsburgh region, cemetery expenses range from as low as $480, and they go up from there. I would say a general range is about $480 to $3,500. So I always tell my clients to keep in mind if you want a traditional funeral service, you're going to spend approximately the national average, which is $8,000, and then you have to add the cemetery expenses on to that. Even if you're going to be cremated, you can always have your loved one's ashes buried upon the grave of a family member that's already buried at a cemetery. When purchasing cemetery property, keep in mind that nothing is free. Oftentimes, my clients tell me that they get information in the mail telling them that they are eligible for a free grave or they're eligible for other services at the cemetery, but nothing is free. Read the fine print. Oftentimes, a cemetery will offer a free grave, but you'll have to pay the opening and closing fee. Sometimes my clients sit down with me and they think that they own everything at a cemetery, only to find out that while they pay for the grave, they still owe for the opening and closing fee. When you're making funeral arrangements, always keep in mind that it's best to pre-need funeral arrangements. By pre-needing funeral arrangements, you can lock in services and merchandise at today's current prices. Next week, we're going to discuss the different vehicles you can use to lock in those pre-arrangements, whether it's life insurance, whether it's putting your funeral arrangements on a down payment system. So stay tuned to next week's Coston Show pre-need program.
Copy and paste.
There's a lot of hidden dangers out there in cyberspace.
Never put your personal information online unless you ask your parents and they say that it's fine. Before you log on, don't be hasty. Please be smart with online safety. Stop and think before your connection. Use these steps for your protection. Online safety.
stop, think,
Connect.
Jimmy can't sing,
and Tommy can't dance.
so we're gonna put some ants in their pants. Aww.
Kids will spend 22 minutes watching us, the super duper party troopers, sing about ants in their pants.
Isn't that funny? Ants in their pants, they got ants in their pants. They've got ants in their pants.
Brushing for 2 minutes now can save your child from severe tooth pain later. 2 minutes, twice a day. They have the time.
Welcome back to the Coston Show. We have our guest for today, Mr. Mark Lewis from the Poise Foundation. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Mark, you're the executive director at the Poise Foundation. Tell us some information about your background and how you got started with the Poise Foundation.
Sure. So I'm a Pittsburgh native, born and raised here, grew up in Garfield for probably the first 8 years, single parent family, so it was my mother, my sister, myself, a strong extended family in the Pittsburgh area, which was crucial to growing up. When we were about 8 years old, my mother moved us to Penn Hills, which I think probably had a profound impact on us. So graduated from Penn Hills High School, went to Michigan State University, studied accounting, came back to Pittsburgh, had the opportunity to work for two of the largest public accounting firms in the world, Pricewaterhouse and Ernst & Young, and then used that to provide some assistance to the Poise Foundation, probably back in the early 90s.
Okay. So now Roland tells me that you were a mentee to the former director of the Poise Foundation.
Yes.
So can you explain your connection?
Sure. So Bernard Jones, who is my hero, I refer to him as my father, definitely my mentor. He was a very interesting man, grew up in the Hill District in the 30s, 40s, saw a lot, saw the Hill when it was a thriving place for African American culture. Obviously lived through the process of the destruction of the Hill District and a lot of the culture that disappeared from there. And had an opportunity to work for some key organizations here in Pittsburgh. So he worked for Hill Cities, which was a youth program back in the 40s and 50s, and worked with a lot of young people trying to just provide guidance and things of that nature for our young people. He then went on to work for Urban Redevelopment Authority and then was assistant director for Allegheny Conference for about 28 years. And I think that's where he just learned a lot about how business works, how people think, how those with wealth think, and how they think differently than a lot of us. And so he used that to really learn, I guess, what we were missing in our communities and to make connections and then take that, those kind of ideas and figure out, what is it that we needed. And so from that, you had institutions that he created like the Misters, which was just an organization of men in his circle that he said, we need to get together, put some money on the table. Part of that money will be for our own growth, but part of that we're going to take and invest back in our community. And from that grew several other organizations, including Urban Youth Action, which has been around for over 48 years now, serving young people and provided probably over 20 to 25,000 young people with internships and positions in different employment throughout the city of Pittsburgh and beyond. Eventually, and I know I'm talking here, but eventually led to Poise Foundation, which was again, an extension of everything that he put in place, but it's an asset that was created for Pittsburgh's African American community to provide funding to support, what our community really needs, that we own and we control. And so that's how Poise really got created. Just real quick, when I was about 10 or 11 years old, Bernie Jones created what he called Urban Youth Academy, Urban Youth Action Academy, which Urban Youth Action started at 14. This is an organization he created a little younger. And he made me treasurer of the organization and bought me my first 10-key little adding machine. And believe it or not, 10 years later, I ended up being an accounting major and graduated with an accounting degree. So that's the type of influence that he had on people. He could look at your personality and see kind of who you are and what direction, and guided a lot of people in that way.
Wow, that's interesting.
Now, in 2010, the Poise Foundation celebrated its 30th anniversary, and you all embarked on the Sustainable Black Community Project. Can you explain what that Sustainable Black Community Project is and what stage the Poise Foundation is in implementing it?
Sure. So when we, at the foundation, when we kind of look at our community and from a broad view and say, what are those factors that really impact us and how do we make a change, a substantial change to take us from where we are today to where our community really wants to go or wants to be. When we look at a lot of the nonprofit services that take place within our community, it seems that most of them deal with the symptoms of what's going on. So in other words, we deal with things after the fact. And we're trying to either correct problems or minimize issues and problems that happen in our community. And for us, we wanted to take a step back and say, how do we start before the problems take place, right? And so we had this idea of just, for lack of better words, we call it a sustainable black community. But the idea was, how do we in Pittsburgh and the surrounding area as a black community come together and develop sustainable practices such that we can take care of ourselves and that we're not dependent. That doesn't mean that we don't get services from government, get services from nonprofits, but we're not dependent on those services, right? And we're viewed as always having our hand out instead of having our hand out but having something in it that we're trying to bring to the table. So what we did was we went and interviewed what we call 13 different constituency groups, about 8 different neighborhoods and 5 groups. Those groups included professionals, they included some seniors in our community, women in the halfway house, college students.
So you had a good range.
A good range, and with one purpose in mind, and that was, what is the vision, or what is your vision for a sustainable black community in Pittsburgh? And from that, we actually received about 300 to 350 people, input from 350 people from those groups, and came up with a vision. And unfortunately, I can't repeat that vision because it's about 2 sentences long. But basically, it states that we want a place where it's beautiful. We want a place that's safe. We want a place that we can invest culturally, spiritually, economically, or reinvest. So it's basically a vision that anybody would want for their community. But we were able to put it to words. And our next stage was, well, now that we have the vision, how do we go back out and really begin to put a strategy together? And during that time, we got connected to some other organizations nationally that were working on a similar process within their communities in black neighborhoods, and found out that they began to look at certain issues that they were concentrating on. So one looked at education, one may have looked at employment, and they were beginning to make some strides, but then after a year or two, those groups' relations kind of fell apart. And so what that informed us was, what we really want to do now is focus on relationship building. So in Pittsburgh, there are these various networks that exist, whether it's the fraternities, whether it's professionals at this organization or corporation. Roland mentioned the frogs earlier. We've got all these different organizations or networks that are there, but in our mind, operating somewhat isolated. And so now we're trying to figure out, how do we begin to connect all of our networks and such that we create this huge, powerful network, and then put something that's powerful in the middle that we can all say, yes, that's what we're trying to achieve. And so that's probably where we are in this process right now, is how do we begin to create these networks and get us connected? There were about, if you look at the last census, almost 125,000 African Americans in the Pittsburgh region. It's not as big as some cities. I think Cleveland is 2 or 3 times as big as us. But it's enough to be able to do something. And back in 1999, and unfortunately I don't have better statistics, right before the census was done, then it said that black people in Pittsburgh had about 1.1 billion of income and about 2.6 billion in the metropolitan area. Right? And so 2.6 billion is not it's not a lot of money to do something, especially if you break it down by people. But think about if we took 1% of that, put that on the table, which would be about $25 million every year, had a program or had something we wanted to invest in within our community, a change that we can make. So often it's not just a need to develop more resources, but how are we using the resources we already have? And I believe that we have enough resources in our hands today that we can make significant change. And if we were able to take those, put those again in a pot, and then have a strategy around that, there would be other resources begging to be involved in what we could do with that money.
Yeah, I love that concept and that idea of having one common thread for all the different segments that you questioned.
Great.
Mark, I love the fact that you brought up that the African American income in the Pittsburgh region is close to $2.6 billion. I am very familiar with the Poise Foundation, and you all have been a foundation or an institution for over 30 years. We see your work in the community, and you said if we pull 1% of that together, we have about $25 million. How do we pull that together?
As you mentioned earlier, individuals can start funds, and there are various types of funds that can be started, individuals, organizations, corporations, it could be really anybody. And there's something called a donor advised fund, which allows the donor to give money, create a fund, but still be involved in how that fund works, because the donor advises the foundation as to where the grants go.
Okay.
Once the fund is set up, and when to give grants, who those grants should go to.
Okay.
So there are various ways to contribute. One way that our community, I don't think, has taken advantage of enough is the whole idea of planned giving. And if you think about the fact that, at some point we all have an exit strategy, or we have an exit.
We do know this.
We know that very well.
Yes.
But what we don't take advantage of is that there are so many ways and opportunities to plan for your estate, whether your estate is large or whether your estate is small. There are ways to do things that you can leave a legacy, whether it's to the foundation, whether it's to a business, whether to whomever. But there's a way that even as we exit this life, that there's what we've done in the past has a way to continue on. And so planned giving is something that I think we're going to try to do a much better job of educating our community, to bring. There are experts within our community that we can bring to individuals and organizations and just groups of people to really explain how planned giving works. And a lot of people, because death is something that, and again, I'm preaching to the crowd here, but death is something that people want to talk about, but it's going to happen.
It's going to happen,
right? And so why let it happen and be unprepared? Plan for it. And there are different ways, just as someone who needs a plan for the burial side, there's other ways to plan, just not for your family, but for the community as well.
Right. Okay, we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back with more from Mark Lewis.
Did you know that every 2 seconds someone in the U.S. needs blood transfusions? Blood donations save over 4.5 million American people every year, because there is no substitute for human blood, and it helps you as well as a donor. You can get rid of the toxic amounts of iron levels in your blood by donating blood today. Donate now and save lives.
Can I go to the sleepover?
Lucy, I want you to promise me something. If there's any drinking, I want you to say, "No thanks, not my thing."
Mom.
I promise you, your real friends won't care. Deal?
I promise, Mom.
They really do hear you.
Did you pack your toothbrush?
For tips on how to start the talk, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. A public service message from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Welcome back to the Coston Show. We are here with our guest, Mark Lewis of the Poise Foundation. Mark, I wanted to ask you about the scholarship portion of the Poise Foundation. I know that you do award scholarships for children in pre-K all the way up through 12th grade, I think?
12th and then post-secondary as well.
Oh, you have post,
Yes,
okay.
definitely.
So if you can talk about the scholarships that Poise grants to children.
Sure. So scholarships is one of the program side activities that we do as far as giving funds out.
Okay.
I'll start with the post-secondary. That's been our longest running. So many individuals, as they create funds in Poise Foundation, as you would expect in our community, many people focus on education. So a lot of the funds, individual funds that have been created in our foundation are around scholarships. So scholarships work in several different ways. So for example, an individual can set up a scholarship fund. Now that individual can create all types of criteria. So that criteria could deal with grade point average. We want to give scholarships to individuals who only have a 2.5 or above, or a 3.0 or above. They can say, we only want to give scholarships going to these particular schools. We only want to give scholarships to individuals pursuing these types of careers or majors in school. So that's really up to the donor to really decide, what type of criteria they want to place on the scholarship fund itself.
Okay.
The way it works is individuals deposit money into Poise, make a gift to Poise Foundation, create the scholarship fund, and then there's a certain percentage of that fund that is available for distribution every year.
Okay.
And so that way it's really a fund that's created in perpetuity. Okay. So it'll be there for basically forever is the design. So we have probably about 50 different scholarship funds that individuals have started. We have a few scholarship funds that are high in value, so give more dollars out on an annual basis. We have organizations that have started scholarship funds, and they pretty much stay involved with those funds, so they may have their own programs, and we pretty much manage the money and the process for them. And then we have individuals that apply to the foundation for scholarships, and we have an online application process that really any individual can apply to see what particular scholarships they qualify for, or just in general, and then we'll make a decision as to, based on the criteria, whether they'll receive the scholarship. So that's the post-secondary side. And then last year, we were actually engaged by the National NAACP to manage the administration of their scholarship funds.
Oh, wow.
So that was a huge win for us.
Yes.
And so we're very proud of our ability and recognition to do that. Since 2003, we've been involved in the Education Improvement Tax Credit Program, which is a state government-run program where corporations give us donations.
Okay.
They make donations to us, and then families apply to have their children to get financial aid for tuition assistance for their children, anywhere from pre-K up to 12th grade.
Okay.
And so over the years, we've given over $1 million away out of that program, and have probably served anywhere from 600 to 700 families, and a lot of those families are repeat families. And so that, again, I believe that period opens up around January of a given year and goes through maybe May as far as the application process.
Okay.
And then we go through and analyze a lot of data and then make decisions. And by the time the school year comes around, so we're finishing up right now, making grant awards to, we have about 67 different private schools and Catholic and Christian schools throughout the county, for the most part, participate with us.
Mark, I am just so impressed with the Poise Foundation, and I'm sure that Barnard Jones would be proud to see that what his legacy is. Are there any grants that the Poise Foundation are involved with?
Yes. So over our history, and Poise has given out grants almost since its beginning, maybe a couple years after it started. And as we began, we were very reactive to requests coming in from the community. And I would say about 80% of the grants that we've given away over the years were focused around youth and children in some way, and that's really because that's what the community requested grants for. So a lot of community centers, a lot of after-school programs, a lot of summer programs requested funding from us. We've given money away also for economic development, arts and culture, and so a wide array of different programs and nonprofits we supported. About 2 years ago, we took a deep look and said, we give away small dollars compared to most of the foundations in our area, and we're kind of spreading our money out across a lot of different places. And we said, how can we have a greater impact, in our grant making? And what we decided to focus on were families. We said that the family is the first institution that was created. It's where most people, and if it's done right, most people learn basically everything they really need to know up to a certain point, and then we send them off to school to get further educated.
We hope we send them out. We hope they get out.
But if you think about the fact that, especially here in Pittsburgh, our families have broken, just the structure of families have broken down so much that we really are concerned about the values, the morals, the education, just the learning and everything that our kids need to receive from our families, because our structures have disintegrated. And I think we're somewhere around 72 to 73% of single parent-headed families. And if you think about that, it's not a knock. Like I said, I came from a single parent family. It's not a knock on those families, but it's hard enough if you have two parents in the house trying to work and provide and do everything you need for the family. Let alone to have a single parent who's out there working, doing everything they need to do, taking care of themselves, and then you have, figure out how do you raise your child, at that same time. And so it's not just the nuclear family we're looking at, but also there used to be this huge extended family that played such a large part in our development and growing up. And because of various reasons, even that's breaking down. So our grant making now is focused on, strengthening families. And we just made 4 grants about a month ago to 4 organizations with about $20,000 apiece. And it's all about how do we create positive interactions in families. So how are we bringing families together? How are we trying to find nonprofits that are not saying, well, there's trauma happening in this family, so how do we help piece them back together? We're saying, how do you nurture the relationship before we get to the trauma piece? And how are there, what is it your organization can do to really begin to nurture and help support creating positive interactions in our families? And if we can do that, then we hope to see, further along, the benefits of strong families taking root in Pittsburgh.
Well, Mark, you have shared some great information with us today, and I want you to repeat the website, so if people are interested in applying for the scholarships for their children. So go ahead with the...
Sure. Our website is www.poisefoundation.org, or feel free to give us a call, 412-281-4967.
All right. Did you want to say anything else?
No.
Well, thank you so much, Mark,
Thank you. Appreciate the
for
time.
being on our show. We really appreciate it. I have learned so much about the Poise Foundation. I didn't even know that you all did so much. So thank you all for joining us once again on the Coston Show, and we look forward